Today I'm going to show you a 2012 action thriller film titled Badass. Be ready for spoilers ahead. The film opens with pictures and shorts depicting the Latin quarters of Los Angeles, featuring buses, graffiti, and highways. Some of the shots have been taken from YouView, which works obviously the same as YouTube. Frank Vega is traveling by bus, and two punks get in. He starts remembering his teenage years, saying that they were the simplest and the happiest. He was the son of some small local farmers and had a beautiful girlfriend called Lindsay. He has to do something with his life, so he decides to join the army and ends up being tortured and wounded in Vietnam. When he returns to the US, he has to follow rehabilitation, and then he tries to come back to his life. However, when he visits adult Lindsay, he discovers that she is already married and has 2 children. He tries to join the police forces, but his physical injuries causes him to be rejected. He can't find a decent job, as all the possible employees want university degrees and experience. Frank finally starts selling hot dogs from a street post, but after 40 years, he realizes that his life has slipped away from him, and he expresses regret for it. When 2 punks enter the bus, they bother an elderly passenger. Frank swiftly tells them to stop their actions, which incites their wrath. However, Frank defends himself and ultimately defeats them with a brutal beating. Some other passengers record this with their mobile phones, and they upload it onto YouView with the title Badass. Frank becomes an instant celebrity, and because of this, he and his mother, Mrs. Vega, are interviewed on the morning program by a journalist. Now his entire community and the police respect him. Officer Marlock even takes him on the patrols. 3 months later, Frank's mother dies. The priest delivers a profound and heartfelt speech, but Frank remains sad anyway. As stipulated in Mrs. Vega's will, he takes all the cutlery to their local church, with the remainder designated for him. On TV, Mayor Williams wants to improve the safety of the Latin quarters. Frank and his longtime best friend Klondike are about to move into Mrs. Vega's home. During the moving, they stop to drink Mrs. Vega's drinks, and they reminisce about the old times in Nam, how Klondike saved Frank's life, and they talk about the best days of their lives, which are yet to come. Klondike also gives Frank a pin driver, emphasizing the importance of keeping it in Mrs. Vega's old safe. He also mentions a plan to become rich. As he leaves to buy more liquor, Klondike is confronted by 2 punks with guns demanding he give them the pin drive. Klondike fights them, and it looks as though he has won the fight. However, Sebastian fires a bullet, instantly killing Klondike as he and the other criminal flee. Frank is called to identify the body the next day and grieves about his best friend's death. He asks the detectives if they will find those responsible. When he goes to the store, Frank beats the crap of 3 punks at a liquor shop so that the clerk gives him the things he didn't have money to pay for. One of his neighbors says that her brother was also killed some blocks away, but the police don't do something when it comes to the black community. However, Frank still believes in the law and goes back home, where he refuses to go on a ride with a police officer, and he thinks that detective is not doing anything to investigate Klondike's death. Malark remarks that they are doing whatever they can to catch Klondike murderers. That night, Frank watches the news and discovers that 20 detectives have already apprehended the murderers of a white man from the previous night, despite the Klondike case showing no significant progress. He goes to the police station to complain about this, but the officer assures him that they're working hard on Klondike's case. Frank feels frustrated when he sees some detectives playing games instead of working, so he decides to take things in his own hands. He goes to the crime scene and finds one strange cartridge and a necklace with a picture inside. He has a conversation with a boy named Martin, but his father tells the boy not to talk with unknown people and neighbors. When Frank Vega visits the thrift store, the clerk informs him that the bullet is for a hunting weapon, specifically designed for government officials and the army. The store clerk remarks that the girl in the picture appears to be a regular attendee of his church. He visits that lady, who is fed up with the man who supposedly lost her necklace at Frank's place named Terrence. She informs him that Terrence has been gone for a week, probably playing basketball with his friends at 22nd Street Park. Frank visits the court and asks the man for Terrence. They don't take him seriously until Frank shows them some of his moves. They inform him about the guy named Ronaldo, who knows where Terrence is. At Ronaldo's place, Frank fights with his roommate dressed as a Catholic priest, who informs him about the club that Ronaldo frequently visits. City Mayor Williams talks to Panther, the informer's contact on the streets. Williams is facing re-election in 90 days, and it all depends on finding that pin drive, and he is afraid of Frank. Panther reassures him that the streets are his and that he'll take care of Badass because his brothers dealt with Klondike in the wrong way. After helping an elderly lady with her bags, Frank is shot, but he manages to survive. Frank still talks to Martin, the cutely savvy son of his neighbor, who is put on violent acts after striking her. Frank asks about Ronaldo at a bar, thereby initiating a bar brawl, which he ultimately wins. The bartender tells him that Ronaldo is upstairs. A pimp tells Frank that Terrence is spending time with his new girlfriend Tatiana, the masseuse at Winter Avenue. Frank is later stopped by friend Officer Marlock, who asks him to stop taking the law into his own hands. The officer adds that he recently stopped the sheriff from issuing a warrant against Frank. Frank gets upset and says that he will not stop until he gets justice for his best friend. At Mrs. Vega's residence, Frank gets attacked by a huge man, who asks him to deliver the pin drive, but Frank throws him out of the house. He then goes to Martin's place. Frank tells Martin to run the drive, and that's how they see all the plans for the regentrification of the whole neighborhood. Frank goes to Tatiana's massage parlor. Tatiana is a blonde masseuse who says she is split up with Terrence and leaves Frank. Looking for Terrence, a badass fan neighbor tells him to burglarize it in, and in fact, he tells him that Tatiana always leaves her back door open. He enters while Tatiana and Terrence are occupied with their free time. Frank takes Terrence's hand through the garbage disposal system and cuts several fingers. Terrence confesses that Sebastian killed Klondike and that Panther was the one who called the shots. On leaving, all the kitchen was stained with blood. Then Frank leaves Terrence with a message from his wife: he should not bother himself to go back home. Frank defends Martin's mother from Martin Sr., who's roughhousing her. Martin's mother thanks Frank, then invites him over for dinner while Mark is having a sleepover at his friend's house. Frank Gentili gets ready to meet her and arrives at her doorstep looking 5 years younger. After dinner, they spent some time talking in Martin's mother's beautiful garden, which had grown and reminded Frank of his own mother. Just as they are about to share a kiss, Martin interrupts them as sleepover gets cancelled. The three then spent some great time together, following which Frank invited the two to stay at his place until their door was repaired. The next day, Frank finds Marlock and gives him the pin drive, revealing it to be the reason Klondike got killed. Before leaving without explanation, he asks Marlock to take care of his dog in case something happens to him. Frank goes to the church and confesses that he is seeking revenge for his friend, as he believes what he is going to do tonight could be considered sinful. Frank heads to the garage to face Panther directly, where Sebastian is also present. However, Panther decides to confront him immediately, but not on his own. Panther tortures Frank with electricity, the same kind of torture that he had to face in Vietnam. Panther finds Martin's mother picture in Frank's wallet, so he threatens him with it that he's going to attack her. As soon as Panther leaves, Frank uses a lighter to free himself, leading to a massive fight. Fire spreads throughout the area, leading to a catastrophic explosion. Panther runs away and takes a bus from a driver to escape. When Frank tells a bus driver that he needs to steal his bus, the driver happens to be a fan of Frank's, so he will let him take his bus happily. Frank chases after the bus, causing chaos and mayhem along the way, until he collides with a building. Panther decides to meet Frank face to face on the streets. Frank swerves at the last moment, but an incoming train crashes into Panther's bus, which of course doesn't stop either of them. They both find Martin's mother at the house simultaneously. Panther wonders how Frank Vega was able to find such a sexy lady. The fistfight breaks out, with Martin's mother clearly siding with Frank, but it's Frank Vega who delivers the final blows to Panther. Frank says that he never had a woman rescue him. She is worried because Frank has a black eye and is bleeding. She escorts Frank indoors to tend to his wounds, leaving Panther alone in the garden yard, his face bleeding. A journalist says that the audience may remember Frank Vega badass, but that he uncovered a major political corruption case, which meant that the mayor's office was linked to a terrorizing street gang. The mayor is seen alleging that he's being attacked by special terrorist groups that are trying to destroy his political and economic agenda for the city. Malark names Frank an honorary police officer, and when he hands him his badge, Frank becomes speechless. Martin's mother and her son dine together with Frank. Frank says that it was the best day of his life, and the son tells him to trim that damn beard. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this.